Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you've been waiting for it. You've been chomping at the bit. Welcome to Sim Race South Africa Round 4 at the beautiful track of Misano out in Italy. And we are in for a real treat. Because it's Round 4, we're getting closer to the end of the championship, which means drivers are really stepping up the bar to see who is the quickest, who is the best out there, and who has got enough on the cards to stay at the sharp end of the field. My name is Stephen Koenig. A massive welcome to every single one of you out in the virtual grandstands. And taking a look over in the virtual grandstands, all our VIPs out there. We got Anthony Moritz, who's going to be driving here tonight. We've got Crazy Stun saying, let's go GSRT. Griffin Sim Racing going to be at the top. And fun fact, Griffin Sim Racing not only doing some racing in ACC, but they're going to be jumping into R Factor 2 this weekend. So they are busy mixing things up. But much like our drivers, everyone's looking for the championship in both our servers here in Sim Race South Africa. And going to be looking forward to a stellar charge. Massive welcome to everyone. But let's talk about the track, because it's a bit of a special one. Misano is a track that you either love or you hate. It's a rhythm circuit, and let's take a look at that layout. As we cut on across, there it is, the beautiful circuit of Misano, located out in Italy. And I've got to say, this is a beautiful, beautiful circuit that does have its own little difficulty. It's 4.2 kilometers and will really give you a tough run. 16 corners. Originally was made for bikes before it was open to the GT style. And honestly, has been a circuit that's been around since, well, it broke ground in 1970 and was opened in 1972. So only a 2-year gap between they first put the shovel in the ground to when the circuit was allowed for its very first race 53 years ago. It had a few different names to it as well. Circuito International Santa Monica Misano, Autodrome Santa Monica being one of them, and now, as it's most commonly known as, is Misano World Circuit Marco Simensile. And what a trip it is, and dedicated to the riders of our history. Now, it's got many variants to it, but we're going to be on the GT layout, which is the longest, and also does have a hard kink for turn 1, turn 2, which many of our drivers will remember has opened up a few doors here in South Africa over the many years, and ultimately has come to be one of the fastest circuits, but also where drivers have landed up losing the championship. Also, a good welcome to what we see over here. This is, we've got Antonio Gamble, we got Outlaw saying how's it, wonderful to have you guys here, and always great to see how we're going to really be battling our way around the circuit. Now, it's going to be a tough time, and see what they can do out on the circuit. Now, just taking a look here, got Outlaw just saying a little bit of problem with the mic. Well, turned it up as high as I can go a bit without going and blowing it into the red. So I don't want to absolutely bombard you guys with my, well, Mickey Mouse of a voice. But let's see what we can do. Now, that being said, we do have qualifying underway, but let's take a look at our championship standings. Now, looking at our championship standings, it is a bit of a wild one. We got Sean Loureiro at the top. So far, he's been picking up those wins and really shuffling his way through the order. Ruben Heineke a little bit further down in second place on 195 points compared to Sean Loureiro holding on 198. So a bit of battle between the Griffin Sim Racing drivers. Then we got Sean Skitter holding on to third place in the Honda NSX on 192 points. He's looking to try and fight out. Was originally leading the championship at the start of the season, and unfortunately has slipped down to third place. Jason Farmer holds on to fourth with Ulrich Diaga, Chris Heineke, Anthony Moritz, Timothy Gomez, along with Lubert Menkes, Jeffrey LaRue, Jason Luck in 11th place, Tyron Myberg, followed by Francis Bernardi, Hannes Kruger, and Julian Bernardi rounding out our pack. So our drivers are looking forward to a phenomenal race. The question is, who is going to stand at the top come the end of the season. That is where it's going to be crucial. And we've got our qualifying underway at the moment, with Jason Farmer currently leading the pack. So a quick cut over to the driving and bringing in some of that amazing symphony from our cars. And it's Jason Farmer at the top of the pack with a 134.7. Ruben Heineke holds on to a second place. Sean Loureiro holding on to third. And Lebet Meintjes running in fourth place. Timothy Gomez down in fifth. Ulrich Diaga with Hannes Kruger holding on to that seventh position. He's just pulled into the pits. Peter de Villiers a little bit further down in eighth, with the likes of Gert Swart of the Oxford ATT Racing holding on for a charge. We got Wimpy Meintjes a little bit further down. 10th place is Francis Bernardi, as he's finding out. Anthony Monitz in 12th, with Tyron Myberg, Louis Trichart a little bit further down. Chris Heineke, and rounding out the pack is Jacco Nordman, trying to push as hard as he can. So, with that being said, so far the drivers that are on a stellar run is the likes of Meintjes and Bernardi coming across the line. And Bernardi, unfortunately, unable to improve on that one, just going and losing out a little bit of time, while Wimpy Meintjes currently up 1.5 seconds over his original time of 138.7. This is going to be a good one for him, as he boots it down to the wire, heading down to the start-finish line, crosses the line. He's able to put a time on the board of a 137.2. Not able to move him up through the order, but definitely one way to stay in for a stellar charge. And is going to be one to keep an eye out for. Jason Farmer down in up in first place with a 133.8. Fastest in Sector 1 and Sector 2 so far. But Sean Skitter holding on to that second place. 0.03 separating him at the moment, and trying to give it that little bit more pressure. Trying to see if he can move up through the order. Always a tough time out here, and drivers trying to figure out what they can do to really dive down on that pace, to really move forward. Ruben Heineke holds on for third place. Well, never mind. He goes and boots himself up in second, go and line up against his teammate, but it is 0.2 of a second slower. Skitter's looking good, but was only able to improve his time slightly to move up into third place. Not able to really dart up through the order. So it's always a tough time there. Sean Loureiro trying to catch up along with Ulrich Diaga. We got Lebet Meintjes of the Quacker Racing pulling into the pits. And they're getting themselves sorted out. Tyron Myberg for the Go Slow team trying to push a little bit harder in 7th position. Gomez a little bit further down for the Absolute Racing, booting his way through, trying to keep his foot on the gas the whole way through. Jacco Nordman trying to keep in that top 10 and does improve to 9th position as he comes across the line by 0.3. Wimpy trying to carry a bit of momentum, but lost out a lot of drive out of that final corner, costing him time. The only driver thus far that hasn't got a time on the board is the likes of Anthony Monitz, who at the moment is currently 0.1 up on his personal time, but is just flirting with trying to get that time in. Unfortunately, it's been off track, costing him time in that Ford Mustang. He hasn't found quite that comfort as yet to fight it out, but Farmer lines up against Ruben Heineke as his teammates. The two Ferraris looking to push a little bit harder and see what they can do. Running out a little bit wide as Heineke costs himself a little bit of time there. It is going to be Farmer with a 133.5 on that last run. Heineke tried his best, got a 133.8, but unfortunately did run a little bit off the road, costing that little bit of time, gets it off track, and unfortunately what would have been a stellar run got taken away from him. Sean Skitter holds on to fourth as Loureiro giving a bit of a chase. The first of the front engine cars, the BMW of Sean Loureiro, trying to keep a little bit of a leg up on Ulrich Diaga. He's sort of parked off on the right-hand side, who goes back to pits and will be getting himself sorted out for the race. Now, we haven't got a huge field as Anthony Monitz parks it into the sand, but this is a crucial part of the championship. This is where you want to make sure you stand at the top, and ultimately, who is going to be the ones at the top? It's going to be a tough fight. It's going to be a great one, and ultimately, who is going to maximize the points? Jason Farmer at the moment looking to beat out the rest of the field. He has been on a stellar charge. He has been on the uptake for the last couple of weeks in the world of ACC, out in South Africa, sim racing, and overseas, but has been having a run of bad luck that's been costing him a bit of time and also throwing him down in the championship. For Sean Skitter, he's exactly where he is in the championship, lying in third place, wanting to try and pick up the pace. As we take a look at Jaco Nordman at the moment, he's pushing as hard as he can out in the McLaren, really revving it up, giving it as much pace as possible, absolutely keeping it pinned all the way through into the right-hander, holds it in fourth, down to third, down to second, into first, carries a lot of momentum to try and keep that drive, absolutely booting it all the way, trying everything he can, but just not having the run he wants to really go and help out. He is absolutely trying his best, but is just not finding that time to really go and one up. Every time he picks up by 0.3, he just cuts that corner a little bit too tight, loses a bit of time with understeer, goes back to 0.1, flirting with that 135 that he needs to get down to. His best time was a 136.2, but now needs to get up to that top 10 of a 135.5 that was set by Mankeys ahead of him. Comes across the line though, it is going to be an improvement down to a 135.8, but not quite that top 10 pace, and will be trying to just dig that a little bit deeper. Jason Farmer still out on circuit along with Ruben Heineke, going and giving a hard push for second place. Skitter back out on circuit. He's going to try and give it a final push for the next 9 minutes of qualifying, and our driver's just looking for every opportunity, but it is Louis Trichard down at the bottom and not having the easiest of runs here. Best lap time is 137.6 to the likes of Gerrit Swart, who holds on for that 16th position with a 137.4. And then we got Wimpy Mankeys sitting with a 137.2. Those are the only three drivers sitting in the 137s, while our top three, Jason Farmer, Heineke, and Skitter, sit in the 133s. And that is a distinctive difference in pace. Sean Loureiro sits in the 134 along with Ulrich de Jager, so the two BMWs going and matching pace at the moment. And just beyond them, from the likes of Myberg, all the way down, all the way to Jaco Nordman, who holds on to a 135.8. So the 135s is the mid-grid pace at the moment. The question is, can they sustain that for the duration of the race? And this has always been the hard part about the championship, is who can keep a solid pace, who can keep moving forward, and who will ultimately stay at the top come the end of it. At the moment, all the drivers just trying to dig deep and really figure out the pace, as we do see the likes of Gerrit Swart stopped off into the dirt. He's going to be going back to pits, not been going and improving his time, finding a bit frustrating out here at Misano, and it is starting to hurt the drivers. They're starting to think about, right, what do I need to do to try and get that pace underneath me? What do I need to do to be at the sharp end of the field? And also, come the race, what do I need to do to manage the pace around me? Currently, Mankey sits at the top of the, well, sits at the bottom of the top 10 and sits with a 0.5. So he has climbed the most in terms of time on this lap. Does come across a line, and that moves him up into 8th place. A solid charge on his part. Great improvement. And now he needs to try and find that little bit of time that he lost out in Sector 1. That was his compromising spot. Ulrich de Jager for the Griffin Sim Racing team out in the purple, trying to push as hard as he can to stay in for a solid drive. It's going to be a tough one though. Late on the brakes, throws the car in through the right-hander and gets right back onto the power. The BMW naturally has a bit of an understeer to it, with that front engine just really tossing it off into the corners compared to the mid-engine counterparts that are right at the front with the Ferraris and the Honda NSX that holds on to that third place. Ulrich de Jager late on the brakes, dips the nose in, swings it out wide, keeps his foot on the brake, just trailing it in the whole way through, back onto the power. He is currently matching his sector times and just not finding that little bit of an edge. One person that is finding an edge on everyone is the likes of Timothy Gomez, who currently sits 0.2 up on his personal best. 135.5 is what he's set with, and now trying to see if he can improve it. Try and move himself up into the top 5. Late on the brakes for the final corner, in through the left-hander, running out a little wide. That rear didn't want to bite with him, and unfortunately that went and cost him a severe amount of time and was not able to improve. Anthony Moneritz, who was battling a little bit further down the bottom of the circuit, trying to get a time in, sits in 9th, and still trying to push that Ford Mustang a little bit forward as Myberg goes and cuts him off at the top, puts himself into 8th position, and will be more than happy on that solid run. So the drivers are still trying to dig deep for the next 5 minutes and 26 seconds. Everyone looking forward to a solid drive. And ultimately, it's going to be who can keep that solid drive. Chris Heineke out in the Aston Martin, really trying to push as high as he can. He went and invalidated his time by just running over the rumble strips, went in a little too hard, and that unfortunately has cost him a fair chunk of time. Louis Trichardt down in 16th, currently 0.4 up on his time, same as Timothy Gomez. They're both trying to give it that extra little bit of push in the Ferraris, leaving Hertzwald to try and pick up the pieces of his race a little bit further down in the order. And we'll have to see how it goes. But so far, no one's been able to break Jason Farmer's time of 1:33.5. Sean Skitzer's got close with a 1:33.8 and holds second place. So he will be starting on the first row, but on the outside to turn 1, which is going to be a little bit of advantage if he can hold the pace into turn 2 and try and avoid some of that understeer that creeps in on cold tires. As Trichardt does come across the line, he's unable to improve on that last one and definitely going to be feeling it. Timothy Gomes comes across the line. He's able to move up into 9th. The Porsche going and having a bit of fun out there. The only Porsche in the field here tonight going and showing it's not completely out of the running as yet. And we've got 2 Ford Mustangs. We have got 1 Porsche, multiple Ferraris, 1 McLaren. I mean, this does show drivers where they're starting to find the grips with the cars, what they're starting to enjoy a little bit more. Chris Heineke going and jumping into the Aston Martin, usually plays around with the Ferrari, enjoying the front engine at the moment, and trying to see with old reliable the Aston Martin as one of the critical drives. Farmer quickest through Sector 1 and Sector 2, but was not fastest in Sector 3 compared to Skitter. So that is going to be Skitter's advantage, but he needs to try and find that little bit of time. 0.28 of a second separates him and Jason Farmer, and it's going to be a tough one to try and find that little bit of pace. He's going to have to utilize a little bit of slipstream to make it work out in his favor with that V6 twin turbo, pushing as hard as possible, really trying to utilize that 500 horsepower underneath the right foot and just try and run the ABS down a little bit, run the traction control down a little bit, just so you can have a little bit more of oversteer to play with, just to carry the momentum through the corners and see if it's going to help you out. It's going to hurt the tires, but it might give him just that little bit of an edge as he gets around the final corner. 0.18 up on his time. He's really pushing. Can this work out for him? He does come across the line, but unfortunately doesn't take that top spot, but does get a little bit closer with a 1:33.6 right onto the back of Jason Farmer's time. He knows he can do it. He's found that little bit of time, and now it's absolutely crucial to try and draw it back. Anthony is the next driver that is so far up on their time by a large margin. He is 0.2 up on his personal best. So 1:35.1 was his best lap time. He's trying to break it down into the 1:34s to join our top 7 that have gotten into the 1:34s. Myberg is still in the 35. Gomes is into the 1:35. Moritz is trying to find that 1:34, push himself out of his comfort zone. Jukka Nordman also doing exactly the same. He's trying to find the pace in the McLaren to really find out what they can do out at the top. And Gert Swart, a little bit further back, currently up 0.2, 0.3 up on his time. He's really found where to get the drive out of this Mustang and ultimately needs to give it that proper run. Can he get it done and dusted? This is where it's going to be hard. He's 0.2 up. He's giving it everything he can, screaming that V8 all the way through to 9,500 RPM. He is pushing that 5-litre as hard as possible and is ultimately going to have to really think about what the solid drive is. 0.2 up on his time. This is going to be a great drive from him and will be able to push him past Trichardt if he can keep this up. But he needs to carry the momentum through while getting chased down by Jukka Nordman, who's looking to utilize that slipstream, pull himself along. This is going to be make or break as we down into the last 55 seconds of qualifying. Gert Swart has literally got to get this done this lap to try and really make it count for him. 0.3 up on his time. 45 seconds to go. 0.4. This is a solid charge. One more corner to get it right. He does go a little bit wide, and I think that might have just invalidated his time as Gert Swart ran out a little bit wide through the second last corner, and it did cost him time. Unfortunately, it did throw the lap away. That would have pushed him up in towards 12th position. He was 0.4 up, but does have one more lap to try and get it done, and Jason Farmer smashes that absolute fastest time with a 1:33.5 dead, and shows off that number one on the car is for a reason. He is a proper contender for the championship. It hasn't been his best championship out there, but still wants to stay at the top and see what he can do out in the Ferrari for the Griffin Sim Racing team. Menkes pushing as hard as he can, holds on for 5th place, currently down on his delta, not finding the time. Kruger going and losing a bit of momentum. He is also out of the running. He was 0.5 up on this lap, but just not finding that pace to really cycle his way up. Not finding that proper bit of momentum to throw his way up through the field. Flat on the gas he goes. And here comes Hannes Kruger. He gave it his best shot, but comes across the line, and he will hold that 12th place at the moment, unless Gert Swart has anything to say about it. He's currently 0.4 up. He has got Nortman on the back of him. Nortman trying to push a little bit harder in the McLaren and is not up on his time. So Nortman is holding back that little bit, is sitting in the mirrors, and Gert Swart ran a little bit wide, cutting it close to the curbing. Goes in through the final corner, pushing as hard as he can. Nortman keeping the pressure on, 0.2 up on his time, and does improve his personal best. Unfortunately, it's not enough to get in the top 10, but will hold 14th position as he gets chased down. Last of the cars come through is going to be Libet Menkes. Great stuff from our drivers. And we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with the race right here at Sim Race South Africa. And we are back, folks, and it's going to be an interesting one. 1 hour and 30 minutes worth of racing with one mandatory pit stop, and the times got down to a 1:33 set by Jason Farmer. Now it's make or break. It's all about maximizing the points in the championship, and everyone has been looking to the card, saying, right, what do we need to do here? So far, it's been a strong showing this season from the Griffin Sim Racing team. They're hoping for a solid push in the championship and really climb their way up into the top running of it. What a drive it would be. What a time it would be to go and win out the championship. But they've got a lot of work ahead of them. Ultimately, Sean Skitter holds in 3rd place, wants to try and make a difference here. Sean Loureiro currently holds the top of the cards in the championship, but holds 4th place at the moment with Ruben Heineke, who's 2nd place in the championship, lining up right next to him. So the two on the 2nd row are fighting out for 1st in the championship, and separated just by a few points. Sean Loureiro on 198 points, Ruben Heineke on 195. Sean Skitter, who is currently starting in 2nd place, holds with 192 points. And that is where the major contenders are. And ultimately, Ruben Heineke has taken 1 win. Skitter has taken 2 wins. Sean Loureiro hasn't taken any wins, but he's been the most consistent in the championship. That has really helped him out. And I do think that is going to sit in the back of the minds of these drivers as they will be looking forward to a solid race. And with our drivers now making their way off the start-finish line, we look forward to what's going to happen. Skitter took the win in the last round. Loureiro got 2nd. Farmer got 3rd with Ruben Heineke in 4th. Jeffrey LaRue in 5th. Taking a top look from last race at Brands Hatch. But now it's all eyes to who is going to stand at the top. And it is going to be a solid run for Jason Farmer. Holds on to that 1st place. Sean Skitter in second in the number 6 Honda NSX, along with Ruben Heineke on the second row in third place. Sean Loureiro in fourth place. The Bet Mankeys holds on to 6th as he will be pushing a little bit harder with Ulrich de Jager coming at him in the BMW. 8th place is Tyrone Myberg, not looking to lose a bit of time here with Timothy Gomez out in the Porsche. Gotta say, love the colors out there. Jaco Nordman will be chasing down in 10th position. Anthony Moritz in the Oxford Oxford ATT Racing holds on to 11th. Hannes Kruger in 12th with Francis Bernardi in 13th. 14th goes to Gert Swart with the likes of Peter de Villiers. We haven't spoken much about him, but keep an eye out. He holds for 15th ahead of Louis Trichard in 16th. And rounding out the field is Wimpy Mankies, going to try and fight out for the top running order. So our drivers now looking forward to what they can do, but it's going to be an interesting one of who is going to get the jump off line. Cold tires, cold brakes, and you will see drivers utilizing a couple of methods to warm it up. One is brake drag. In other words, they're keeping their foot on the brake a little bit by 1 or 2% just to try and make sure those calipers going closed down on the discs, generate a bit of heat in the brake pads. That heat then feeds into the rim, which then feeds into the carcass of the tire. And thanks to the world of sim racing having so much development into it, and ACC having those tire physics, it's able to go and replicate that sort of heat generation. Then we'll notice a little bit of movement left and right as they will build up and scrub those tires fairly hard, trying to generate even more heat into them, but not to go and push that a little too high. Otherwise, it will have an adverse effect where the drivers won't have the grip they need to slow these cars down. Is immediately turn 1 is a hard braking zone in through the right, and turn 2 following straight after. You can land up overshooting the corner. As we round the final corner, this is round 4 of the SimRace South Africa GT3 Championship, and now it comes down to the wire. Farmer, Skitter, who's going to get the jump off the line? 70 kilometers an hour. Hold, hold, hold. Wait for the green. Wait for the green. As it's lights on, lights off, and away we go racing. And it's a great start from Ruben Heineke, holding on for third place. Sean Loureiro going to try his best, but it's Sean Skitter puts his nose forward. Couldn't quite get Jason Farmer into turn 1. Loureiro getting a solid run on Heineke as the two lean on each other quite a bit, with Chris Heineke holding on behind. Loureiro goes off circuit, trying to go and feed it back into the battle. Immediately having a tough time there. Chris Heineke looking for his bit of a run, holding on to 5th place. Lubet Mankies moving up into a solid running of 6th. Ulrich de Jager into 7th, with Tyrone Myberg losing a little bit of time. Now has to keep a very, very close eye on his mirrors as Gomez trying to push a little bit harder. Anthony Moritz going and taking a bit of a tighter line as we do see Gert Swart runs out wide. That's allowed Bernardi to get through. Bernardi out in the Aston Martin is going to be quite happy with that one. So Swart a little less so. Hannes Kruger managing to also capitalize on that mistake, and now looks to go and get the run on Nordman's McLaren. As he dives on the right-hand side, he will have the advantage into the right-hander, but has got to keep his foot firmly in it, utilizing every rev he's got in that V6 turbocharged Ferrari 296. Late on the brakes, going and making it past the 720S McLaren of Nordman, and moving up into 11th position. A great, solid run. Unfortunately for Bernardi, a little bit too late on the brakes, costing him a bit of time there, but Gert Swart a little bit too far back to capitalize, with the likes of de Villiers holding on the back of him. Trekhardt and Mankies rounding out the field, but as our leaders come across the line, Jason Farmer not holding back at the moment, carrying on a solid run as they make their way through. But it is going to be Heineke and Loureiro as one of our closest battles, fighting out for that 3rd place spot. The Ruben Heineke and the Ferrari trying to keep ahead of the Griffin Sim Racing's very own Sean Loureiro, who currently leads out the championship. He wants to try and capitalize. Chris Heineke sinking in a little bit too deep through the corners, costing him some time, and that ultimately is not working out in his favor, trying to push a little bit harder every step of the way, trying to see what exactly can be that solid charge up through the corners. with Heineke still holding on to that third. He does not want to back off. He does not want to lose time to Sean Loureiro, but he is starting to lose time to Skitter. Has to go a little bit more aggressive on the brakes, try and make it work. Gomez managing to get past Moritz a little bit further down the order, with Ulrich Diaga hunting down the back of Lubet Meintjes out there in the Ferrari. So tough racing indeed, with Ulrich Diaga now looking around the outside of the Ferrari. Going to be a little bit harder to get it done. Looked for the cutback, but had to go and slam on the anchors, costing him a bit of time. Moritz looked on the inside of Gomez. Couldn't quite get that pass done either, but tries to keep it tight. Gomez goes around a little bit wide. Timothy having a little bit of a poor drive with the Porsche, but is now managing to outdo Anthony just by standing on the gas, allowing the rear to rotate underneath him and get on the power as early as possible. Ulrich Diaga in a solid chase, closing up at a rate of knot. Meintjes are trying to hold on to that 6th place as Chris Heineke has left him for dead here. So there is no slipstream, and Ulrich Diaga is getting all the advantage. But the more he's getting held back, take a look. Tyrone Myberg starting to close up that gap. Little by little, he is seeing an opportunity here and will be trying to think, right, what's my game plan? How can I close that distance? And where exactly can I get that solid charge? Ulrich Diaga, late on the anchors, throws it down the inside. Couldn't quite get that pass done, but really trying to close up at a rate of knots here. He knows he's got to keep that solid drive and what it's going to happen. A little bit further back, we got a little bit of a battle as Kurt Swart loses out a bit of time and instantly allowed De Villiers to dive up on the inside. Let's go back a little bit and take a look at that pass, because it looked to be a great one. A yards back send from the likes of De Villiers to get it done, and that went and allowed him to get ahead of Kurt Swart. He had to open up the corner just a little bit more, and now it's a fight back as Swart goes down the inside. He carries the momentum through and tries to retake that position. Edith De Villiers, who looks down the inside yet again, not able to get past just as yet, but is trying to break later and later, seeing how far he can sink it into the corner to try and get that pass done and dusted. But all that's done is allow Louis Tricot in the Quacher team to close up the gap and really lean on the pressure. So he's trying to get a solid drive. Unfortunately for Wimpy Meintjes, he's down in 17th at the moment. 10 seconds back from this fighting duo, is just trying to circulate, maximizing points in the championship. And if you see the green, you got to see the checkered. You really got to try and focus on a solid drive here to really move forward in the race. As, Tyrone Myberg getting very out of shape coming out of the corner and not having the easiest of time. Let's quickly go and take a look from in-car what that looked like. So he goes over through the left-hander, runs out wide over the anti-cut curves, had to go and catch the rear that snapped out underneath him, but was able to bring it back, but loses that little bit of time to the fighting pair ahead of him. And ultimately, that's going to cost him a bit of time. Ulrich Diaga tried to look for the inside pass, couldn't quite get that one done. As we do have a fight out at the back, Hannes Kruger holds on for the top 10. Moritz chasing him down in 11th, and Jaco Nordman trying to close up the gap as well, as these three are getting into a solid fight. Now it is going to be an interesting one for Anthony Moritz. How hard is he willing to go against Hannes Kruger and burn those tires up? It's a hot day here at Misano, and drivers are most certainly starting to feel it, trying to figure out what is going to be that solid drive, and ultimately who is going to have that run down the order. Hannes Kruger, though, just pushing a little bit harder, seeing he's got the exit on Moritz and leaving him to Jaco Nordman as they both run very close to the wall. Hannes Kruger goes in a little bit later towards the wall to try and line himself up for turn 1. As we do have yellow flags for De Villiers, who's got it all out of shape, out of the final corner. What on earth happened? He swings the car in, goes a little bit wide, cut the curb a bit, and bang into the wall. That is a Ferrari going to be suffering a bit of nose-in damage, and will have to get himself sorted out during the pit stop, but needs to try and make up some time now, as 1.8 seconds behind him. Wimpy Meintjes finally seeing an opportunity here to go on the attack. Jacco Nordman keeping the pressure on Moritz, trying to see where he can get the pass done. Jacco really trying to sink in as deep as he can, see if he can close in on the Mustang, as Ulrich Diaga trying to close up on the Ferrari. Ultimately, these drivers are really trying to dig deep and see what they can do, but also playing a little bit of strategy here of how hard are you willing to push for the first start of the race. It hasn't even been 10 minutes yet, and the drivers are really starting to play the waiting game, trying to identify when is the opportune chance to get past, when can they save fuel, when can they lift off of the throttle as well, and ultimately it's going to be a tough race indeed. Ultimately, with Meintjes holding on to that 6th place, he is just punching a hole in the air for Ulrich Diaga, which is allowing Ulrich to save a bit of fuel. And that also goes in for the very sharp end of the field. Jason Farmer has checked out of the fight a long time ago, and that's allowed Ruan Heineke and Sean Loureiro to get on the back of Skitter. And Sean Skitter is now also just punching a hole in that air. He is just trying to keep up a solid drive, but just not finding his feet to try and pull away from Ruan Heineke. And Sean Loureiro keeping a very close eye on the two of them. Does not want to lose time here, but also thinking about strategy coming into play. How far is he willing to go in the BMW to try and make it work? Ruan Heineke now putting a little bit of pressure back onto Skitter, seeing if he can go for a pass, trying to sit in the mirrors, looking for any opportunity in the right-hand side, really trying to lean into it, seeing if Sean Skitter is going to react to any sort of movement and see if he can possibly get that pass done and dusted. So far, Jason Farmer, 2.7 seconds ahead, is not looking to lose time, looking to put yet another win underneath his belt for the season and try and help a full set of points for the championship, while Sean Skitter at 2nd place at the moment will be picking up a good solid points over Ruan Heineke and Sean Loureiro. But now as we cross over in 39 seconds is our 10-minute mark. The drivers have been pushing harder and harder. They've been sliding those cars out, and they will start to adjust their brake bias little by little, just to try and move things a little bit forward, a little bit back, depending on how the car's feeling, and also try and conserve those tires or try and maximize pace, as they do have a mandatory pit stop that comes into play. Whether they take a set of tires is a different story. A pit stop comes down to you park it in the box, you've got a square that you need to park it in. If you're slightly ajar from it, they'll lift you up, move you, put you down, lift you up again, and that doesn't count as a pit stop. Once you go up on the jacks, you got to put at least 1 liter of fuel into the car and then get released. That will allow you to count as your pit stop. Ultimately, it sounds easier than it's actually done, but also we've seen this pit lane numerous times in the past here at Misano, where if you come off the button a little bit early, if you shift from 1st to 2nd, which shuts off that pit limiter, you can score a very hefty penalty, a drive-through that can absolutely go, stop go 30-second, that will kill your momentum in this race. And also, Misano, very, very well known for going on track limits, and ultimately can go and cost you a fair amount of time. It looks like we do have a retirement, unfortunately, as a couple of our drivers running into a bit of problems early on and not having any easy race out there. Drivers trying to really, don't have a retirement. It was just a blip on our timing system on, off, and back. But Ruan Heineke, out of the final corner, keeps a solid drive onto the back of Sean Skitter, trying to see if he can close up at a rate or not. We jump on board the Ferrari into turn 1, down the gears into 2nd, feathering the throttle through and trying to carry a lot of momentum out of turn 2, turn 3, up into 3rd, goes into, holds it in 3rd, not even looking at 4th gear there, holds the revs pretty high into 1st gear to slow the car down. Very, very interesting. Numerous drivers, they will go and see the revs up. They'll change into 4th with a quick change down into 3rd. Ultimately, these drivers opting rather not to, rather hold it in the revs, cut down that shifting time. That will go and cost him a fraction of a second, but that fraction of a second is currently make or break for Heineke onto the back of Sean Skitter as they continue on. But he's lost track of Sean Loureiro. You could see just in the mirror from that center console that you've got the little video cam in the back. That little speck where the BMW should be currently lies way, way back by a second. Ulrich Diaga continues to hold on Mankeys as the drivers now start to settle into a rhythm, all sitting roughly within 135s with occasional touches into the 134s. Our top 4 holding on to the 134s. Jason Farmer sets a fast lap time of the race with a 133.8, just off his qualifying time, let me remind you, which is a 133.5 dead. And he now holds a 133.8 on a full tank. That is some serious pace he's carrying. And now trying to see if he can make it really work up in towards this race. A tough race indeed. And ultimately, drivers having to really think about their strategies here and how far they're willing to go. Ruan Heineke trying to push a little bit harder. Holds on for third place as Sean Herrera trying to close up that gap. Skitter losing a little bit of time. That rear not as comfortable as it once was. And now starting to feel the pressure as we get into the next phase of the tires where it starts becoming, I like to say, very gummy. And think of it like gum in the mouth. It starts to become very, very sticky, but also has that little bit of a slime effect to it as Skitter runs out wide. That costs him a bit of time and also didn't take his foot off the throttle. That's already a warning from race control saying, listen, you've now exceeded track limits. You've got 2 more before you get a drive-through penalty, and that will rack up. That is something you don't want to have in this race, as the pit stop can be long, but the drive-through is absolutely brutal to have here at Misano. You do not want to go and visit unnecessary into this pit, very much like what the Spa Endurance pit is, where it's just incredibly long. You're on that pit limiter, and you can just hear the drivers. You can see the drivers to the right-hand side of you going and getting by. And ultimately, that's going to cost him time. Ruan Heineke going to push a little bit harder. He's seen the mistakes starting to happen and will be starting to lean into it a little bit more, trying to see what he can do. A little bit further back, away from the Griffin Sim Racing team, is the Quokka and Absolute Racing drivers trying to push each other a little bit harder, holding on for that 9th and 10th position. Timothy holds on with the Porsche, trying to see what he can do to ultimately break away from Hannes Kruger on the back of him. Kruger trying to go a little bit later into the braking zone, cuts the curb by quite a bit into turn 1. You can see how much he closed up, but that is going to be a track violation that gets picked up as well, and that is just ratcheting on to this race. Early on, you're starting to pick up those incident points, which doesn't leave you with much breathing room when the tires start to fade away towards the latter part of the race. And ultimately going to be a tougher race indeed, because you start to think about it. You start to see those warnings racking up, and you also start to think, okay, I'm braking that a little bit later, but I am costing myself time with possibly a drive-through coming in. Rather try and slack it off and see what I can do, especially in the early stages of the race here. You don't want to go and be suffering with that time. Ulrich Dialga trying to get a solid drive at the moment. He's pushing as hard as he can as he's on the back of Mankeys, looks for the inside, trying to get that nose in a little bit forward of the BMW. No room there. Mankeys immediately braking that little bit later, allowing the trail braking to come off, lifting as much as he can off that brake pedal early on to just coast the car through, just having enough to just twist it in through the corner, but not costing him time. Ulrich Dialga taking another stab at him, just trying to put that pressure on. Sit in the mirrors, make that nose bigger and bigger in the rearview mirror, and just reminding Mankeys, listen, I'm here, I'm right on the back of you, and takes one slip up and I got you. Just by sitting, you start playing that psychological element as a driver of whether it's going to be a pass or it's going to be a wait, especially when they start to close up like that. When you're in the seat on Mankeys, you're going to be thinking, all right, I'm now having to think about if this car is possibly going to run up my gearbox. Do I need to straighten up the corner, or do I need to carry on turning in and believe the driver has got it on the brakes? And take a look at how far Ulrich Dialga's nose on that BMW is diving. He is hard on the anchors to slow it down right at the end, engine braking and all, to just try and make up that little bit of time. He does take a few stabs, but every time he takes one, he costs himself a bit of time by not getting that pass done and dusted and not having that success in getting the pass sorted out. So this is the thinking game. This is the waiting game. He looks to the inside. Can he get that pass done? He lines up side by side. Pushes that nose forward. Forces Mankeys out wide. And unfortunately for Mankeys, he drops down as Ulrich Diaga finally gets that pass, but now needs to guard the line. He's been chasing for so long. How is he going to react now that he is gone from chasing to chased? And we'll see if Mankeys can keep in that dirty air a little bit longer as the two of them brawl on, fighting on for that 6th and 7th place. And that is just one of our fights out here. Ruin Heineke and Sean Skitter still leaning on one another as they start to open up a big gap, 1.4 seconds to the current championship leader of Sean Loureiro, who is having a great bit of fun out at the moment. He is constantly thinking, right, what do I need to do to open myself up for the championship here? For Ruin Heineke, it's all about maximizing those points, seeing what he can do to try and fight out for the championship, compared to Sean Loureiro, who holds on for 3rd. If he's able to get into 2nd place, put Skitter into 3rd, and Loureiro holds on to 4th, that means that Loureiro is going to lose out in the championship, with Heineke moving up in towards 1st and have a bit of a buffer zone to the likes of Sean Loureiro. But that also brings Skitter and Loureiro a bit closer to one another to ultimately have a tougher fight in this race. For Skitter, he is losing points to Jason Farmer, who holds 4th in this race. He's so far had no wins this season. He is trying to make a win for himself right now. And Jason Farmer, by opening up a 4-second gap, is already starting to get that little bit of breathing room come the pit stop, as we now cross over to 12 laps in this race. 11 laps completed, we're on to our 12th, and it's still a hard push. Timothy losing time to Hannes Kruger, with Anthony Moritz now putting a bit of pressure on with the Mustang. It is Mustang, Ferrari, Porsche in a row, and ultimately who has got that long run? It is all about the 6 cylinders that are ahead of the V8 at the moment, that are having a stellar drive. Anthony just not having the cornering over the mid-engines ahead of him. Hannes Kruger, solid drive onto the back of Timothy. Now seeing that 9th position is a little bit closer and can go for it. He has to really dial it up to get that pass done. Anthony a little bit quicker into turn 1, was able to close the distance, and now seeing he can try and make that pass to happen as Timothy opens up a little bit of room. It's a yo-yo effect the whole way through, and ultimately these drivers now trying to outdo one another. And a little bit of a late break and run for Hannes Kruger, who hooks on to the anti-cut curb. That's cost him time. Anthony looking around the outside, brakes, turns in, trying to swing it through the Oxford Distributors car. Not having an easy time out there. Tries to come back as Hannes Kruger over the track limits once again. Flirting with it. Anthony knows that he's got a bit of pressure here. He's starting to see that Ferrari with a little bit more mistakes happening in the race, and Hannes Kruger having to keep a very close eye on the mirrors instead of watching out his front windscreen at Timothy. It's a 0.3 of a second between them, and it is still a solid drive as we jump on board with the Ford Mustang GT3 late on the brakes, trying to swing it through. Not an easy drive out there, and ultimately these drivers pushing harder and harder. Kruger getting a little bit unstable yet again. The rear starting to get a little bit loose on that Ferrari. Anthony lifting off quite a bit. That's cost him a bit of time through the kink, and now into the final corner, just trying to carry the momentum through, but ultimately it's Kruger who's got the far better drive there and closes up the distance to Timothy Gomez ahead of him, pushing for that pass. Out in front, Ruin Heineke try to close up the distance to Sean Skitter, but not having that advantage, really costing him a bit of time here and trying to think, right, I'm pushing harder, I'm losing time. Ultimately, let's think about the fuel saving strategy, the tire saving strategy. Maybe it's going to be advantageous to stay on the same set of tires depending on what their usage is and depending on how the tires feel like. As I was talking about, that gummy effect where you do have grip, but it does feel like it wants to slide underneath you, and it's got a very low threshold. As you sink it deeper into the corner, those tires are gone as they come off a cliff. That little bit of grip you're holding on to starts to fade away. That little bit of confidence, as Kruger's starting to experience, starts to disappear underneath you. He's sliding around, and now that's given Moritz a little bit of an opportunity to go side by side, chasing down towards the right-hander. Looks like it's going to be the Mustang's advantage as the Ferrari runs out wide, looking to come back. Kruger ultimately couldn't quite get that car back underneath him, and it's going to be Anthony up into the top 10, and now needs to try and get his foot onto the throttle to get away from the Quaco Racing Team. Hannes Kruger at the moment, who puts the pressure immediately back on him, looking for every opportunity, and that's just allowed Timothy to open up that little bit of distance. Kruger runs out wide once again, going in, hooking those curbs, costing him a bit of time here, and not having the easiest of fight outs. Libet Mankies holds up for 7th as he chases down Ulrich Diaga. That is 6th and 7th who are having a go. We also got the likes of Louis Treckard, who's keeping a bit of pressure on Gert Swart, who has unfortunately gone backwards in this race. Hasn't had the easiest of time, and ultimately been losing that little bit of time. So from grid position, Ulrich Diaga's gained one. Libet Mankies has lost one. For Anthony Moritz, he's gained one. So has Hannes Kruger gained one. Jaco Nordman has lost two. Louis Treckard has gained one. Peter de Villiers has lost one at this stage of the game as for our race. So the driver's still trying to find that threshold. So far, the quickest car out on track in terms of top end speed is this car, right? Sorry, not that case actually. It is the likes of Anthony Moritz, sitting at 251 kilometers an hour as he went through our speed trap, compared to the rest of the field sitting at 249, 244. So guys opting for a lot more of a higher downforce to try and carry through the corners, costing him a little bit of time. And ultimately that is actually played into Sean Lourero's hands with the 252. He's currently the fastest car in terms of speed trap top speed, sits at 252 kilometers and getting a solid pace out there out of his car, and once again having a good go. Heineke pulling the trigger on Skitter a little bit harder now, trying to see if he can really put the pressure on, see if he can get that pass done and dusted, and it's going to be a tough time as Ruben Heineke late on the anchors for the Griffin Sim Racing team, trying to go onto the back of Sean Skitter, who ran out wide once again, flirting with those track limits, and that will be eyed out by the stewards inside the sim, saying, right, you're running a bit close to those track limits. You're starting to cut them down. You got 3 warnings before we hand out the drive-thrus, and they will start to hand them out like candy. And unfortunately, can really be a massive impact to your race. And Heineke knows that Skitter is starting to feel that pressure, starting to lose that little bit of time. Ruben Heineke seeing Skitter cutting the curbs a little bit more, bouncing over the curbs. Both these drivers have fought it out across multiple championships across the world in these very same cars. Doesn't matter where you are. European championships, South African championships. It has been a solid campaign from these two as rivalries. But Farmer long since checked out the fight. 5.7 seconds into the lead and still opens up a strong lead over the rest of the field. He's looking to try and make it work out in his favor. The Yankees keeps the pressure on Ulrich Diaga, who is lying in 6th place a little bit further down, and part of the 3 front engines that are, sorry, that would be our 5 front engines that are currently sit. So we got a half and half at the moment. BMW, Aston Martin, BMW, Ford Mustang that holds on to the top 5. So an even split in the top 10 at the moment of front engines, but don't count out our drivers in mid engines a little bit further back out of the top 10 to stay in for this fight. They want to try and push just as hard as everyone else. Moritz now onto the back of Timothy, who's out there in the Porsche, the lone Porsche, the 991, still giving a solid charge at the moment and giving it everything he can do to have a solid drive. Ultimately, this is going to be a bit of a worry when it comes down for Timothy, who's busy looking in his rearview mirror, seeing that Moritz has no one on his tail, and ultimately Timothy's going to have to go from just driving his race to now looking a little bit more in that rearview mirror, trying to see where Anthony is, and also coming down to where the strategies are going to come in. These drivers are able to push really far into the race with their pit stops. They're able to get it right down to the last 25 minutes of the race if they're saving a bit of fuel. And that may be what is needed to go and shoot through the field to ultimately stay at the sharp end. As it's late on the break for Moritz, he tried his absolute damnedest to get that pass done. Couldn't quite get it done. Late on the brakes, gets an early sweep in, but Timothy around the outside just carries the momentum. That Porsche just having a solid run at the moment and is still giving it everything he can. So these drivers are feeling more and more pressure on what they need to do to stay at the sharp end. Ultimately, it's going to be which of the drivers can keep that solid run. There's 2 more events left in the championship here for the Sim Race South Africa simGT3 2026 Season 2. And the drivers trying to go and get that victory. And it's still so close on the top. But now Jason Farmer is going to bring himself a little bit closer. He's on 165 points with Ulrich de Jager on 152 points behind him. Chris Heineke sits on 145. And he's in the Aston Martin a little too far back. So Jason Farmer, if he can go and get a solid bit of scoring here, this is going to help him. A cool 70 points that will be added to him. Well, 67 points will be added to Sean Skitter, who holds on for second place. Ruben Heineke will score 64 points. That brings him a bit closer. Sean Loureiro, 61 points. And that just starts to tell you how this race is starting to build up. Ultimately, our drivers trying to think of that opportunity to move forward, that opportunity to stay at the sharp end of the field, and what they can do for a solid run. Each trying to think about what is the next plan in this championship and what they can do here tonight to really move themselves up in the championship. Always thinking, what's the game plan? How am I going to do it? What is going to be the next level? What is the next game plan to start chucking our way up through the order? And also, when it comes to those pit stops, how crucial is it going to be for the drivers to really look forward to a solid drive? And who is going to stay at the sharp end of the field? Tough times indeed, lot to think about here. And ultimately is going to come down to the wire. Who can push that little bit further? Who can really feel a solid drive underneath them? And what is it going to look like come the end of the race? Ultimately, it's going to be just pressure for our drivers. Chris Heineke holds on to that 5th place, and you can see a little bit of no man's land for him at the moment as he's trying to think, what is the game plan here? How can I close up the distance to the drivers and see where exactly I can get that little bit of momentum? How am I going to get that drive as well? It's always a thinking game when it comes to our drivers ultimately in the race and who is going to have that solid run. So Chris Heineke having a great time out there, holds on 6th in the championship and will be trying to push a little bit more, seeing if it's going to be a little bit of more momentum needed to try and stay in the front. Is it going to be enough to stay at the sharp end of the field? And will be battling to try and bring it back from the brink. Always that little bit of thinking game that needs to come into this race and for the drivers when they get into it. Francis Bernardi, also one of our Aston Martins, out on track, having a bit of a tough time. He's in a little bit of no man's land, keeping ahead of Gert Swart, but not quite having that drive needed to go and close up to Jaco Nordman, who holds on to that 12th position. And the drivers just finding their rhythm. We now down into the final hour of this race, and drivers trying to think of what they can do. And Matthew Boy out there in the virtual grandstands actually going and putting a great one. It's going to be an interesting one for him. He's actually kept a good eye on the Heinekes and been keeping track of them, but also raced against them as well. So Ruben Heineke being one of them, and also Chris Heineke. So good to see the brothers having a fierce rival sitting into the grandstands and just tuning in, keeping an eye, and won't be afraid to lean into a few comments saying, hey, listen, I'm a little bit quicker than you. But it's wonderful to see you guys out there in the virtual grandstands. And if you just joined us right now, a massive welcome to every single one of you out in the virtual grandstands to Sim Race South Africa. This is round 4, And we got 2 more rounds after this, and it is turning into a bit of a heated championship up towards the sharp end of the field. We're still keeping track of a little bit of battles further down in the top 10 as Timothy is trying to hold back on Anthony Moritz. He's trying to get a solid drive. We do have Ulrich Diaga and Lebet Mankies going and pushing one another to the brink. These two have not left each other's side and continue to do absolute battle. Same as Ruan Heineke as Wimpy gives a quick flash to the likes of Ruan Heineke, and I do think that was a bit of a thank you for getting it done, and I do want to highlight that as well. So let's go back 15 seconds. Vanke moves out the way, and you can see the hazard lights come on. Ruan Heineke just saying thank you. Wimpy goes and flashes these lights, just says, no problem, buddy, all good. And that is what we love to see in the world of sim racing, and I have to say, I love ACC purely to that fact. You can use those indicator lights to signal where to get past drivers, but also when you have that little bit of time, you can just flick on the hazards, say thank you very much, continue on your race. You don't have to do it, but it's definitely welcomed in the world of sim racing, and we love to highlight it. And Wimpy actually minding out of the way of that fighting duo to allow them to carry on their battle unaffected and continue to see a solid race all the way through. Now, let's talk about this. Timothy, Moritz, and Kruger still keeping a bit of pressure on one another. These three have been duking it out constantly, now trying to figure out what they can do to carry on that little bit of momentum. 11 seconds back from them is Jaco Nordman, who is a little bit out of contention right now, but if it takes one slip up, one little trip, as we do see Anthony once again takes that inside line, trying to get the drive on Timothy, but just can't get that drive out of the corner to really close up on the Porsche 991, and ultimately that is just losing that little bit of time. If these two trip up, that means Hannes Kruger has an opportunity to gain not 1 but 2 positions, and Jaco Nordman will also have that opportunity as well, because it's not going to end in a small little trip up. It's going to be like standing on each other's toes at a wedding during the dance, and that is going to be bride and groom standing on each other's toes. Not a good way to go and have things happen, and will ultimately give you a solid smack between the ears by the end of the evening. And these drivers are not looking to do that, as both of them are fighting out in the championship to see what they can do. At the moment, Gomez having a solid run, looking to try and move his way up in the championship. It hasn't been an easy one for him. Sits in 8th, with Anthony holding in 7th position at the moment. And these two know it's crucial to get ahead of one another, to try and usurp each other in the championship. Timothy sits on 128 points. Anthony sits on 135. And not to count out Mankies, who's in 7th position right now, currently holds on 9th. He has really tried to jack up that pace. He's really tried to lean on the pressure and see if he can get a solid drive as well. Ultimately, these are drivers thinking about the championship and where they need to be as it's on-track battles. Once again, Anthony tries that inside line. He tries it again, but just doesn't get it right. He can't get the drive on Timothy, and now it comes down to the final corner. Timothy gets the momentum, jacks it up a little bit, loses that little bit of time. Anthony gets onto the back of him, and Hannes Kruger once again having an opportunity to try and close up on the fighting duo. Timothy has that outside line down packed. He knows what he needs to do to try and get that drive, while Anthony Moritz constantly goes and bites. He stabs at it. He hunts for that inside line, but just can't get the drive. Needs to try and sit back a little bit, rethink of the strategy. You've tried it once, you tried it twice, you tried it 3 times, you tried it a 4th time. It hasn't quite worked in your favor. Now you got to think about what is the next strategy. What's the next plan to get it done and dusted? Because every time you've taken a stab at it, it's now allowed Hannes Kruger to close up in the Ferrari to really see if he can just knock on that door a little bit more and see if he can try get on by. Our fighting duo up in front, Sean Skitter and Ruan Heineke, hasn't been a change in position, but they have been leaning on each other quite a bit as Jason Farmer now trying to see what he can do. He's got Peter de Villiers ahead of him, and it is going to be a tough time. De Villiers still sporting that damage from early on in the race when he lost the rear end of the car and dived nose first into the wall. It hasn't been too much on his racing drive, but it has cost him a fair amount of time to the likes of Tricot. Louis Trichardt holds on to that 15th position, and with the likes of Kurt Swart just ahead of him within arm's reach. The drivers all thinking, right, we haven't gone for our mandatory stoppers yet. We're now 53 minutes into the race. This is where the tanks are starting to empty out. The tires are starting to hit that drop-off point. Round about the 45-minute mark is where you're mainly going to see those tires, instead of getting as much grip as possible, they will start to think, how can I now jump off a cliff without a parachute? And you are going to come and join me. These cars start to become very slidey, very understeery, and ultimately you're going to have to start changing your driving style. Instead of that hard aggression into corners, you now need to try and open it up a little bit more. Start playing with that traction control, ABS, and also your brake bias. Start trying to tinker around, but also you do have a TC1 and a TC2 to play with in this race. And now, for anyone that doesn't quite know what a TC1 and a TC2 is, that is your gain and also your a little bit of a sway. So when we talk about TC1, that is your forward and back. That is when you're going and accelerating out of the corners. That forward and back motion, that seesaw motion that you get. You start to work on TC1 for that one. TC2, it allows you to work on left and right, how much it starts to move around through the corners. Midway through the corners are the main factors for our TC2. If you want to try and give it a little bit more rotation, you start turning that TC2 down instead of the TC1, and you try and focus on your corner exits of your TC1, trying to get that little bit of momentum underneath you. These are the different factors the drivers are starting to play with inside the cockpit of these cars and starting to fight it out ultimately in a tough ton. I mean, these are going to be a solid run for the drivers, as we do see Anthony manage to clear Timothy Gomez, and Kruger loses the back end of the car into turn one. What on earth happened to him? Let's jump on board with the Ferrari, heading into turn one, hooks it in, clips the anti-cut curb, nearly misses into the back, and it just kept turning. The rear kept stepping out underneath him and bit in with that traction control, ultimately costing him a bit of time. But he closed up at a rate of knots onto the back of Timothy, and that just didn't turn out in the way he wanted. That allowed Timothy to get the run, but it's now Anthony who's able to clear that solid charge and once again open up the room to one another, trying to see where exactly he can get that little bit more of a charge through the order. This has been a very interesting race for a lot of our drivers who have been thinking about what they can do to move forward. And I do want to even point out, in terms of contacts, we've got none. Absolutely no contacts. And I cannot stress this enough. Around Misano, when you're in close proximity to one another, you're fighting out between one another. You are absolutely nose to tail with your competitors from start to now. 49 minutes and 50 seconds left of this race. Not a single contact has been registered by the sim. We have had drivers go and have the rear snap out and clout the wall, or go and step out and land up in the dirt, as we've seen. But we have not had two drivers collide under braking, have not collided under any circumstances, and that tells you the level of these drivers, the standard of these drivers, how pro they are as they can fight out in close proximity. Now, first to the pit stops coming in. This is a good tell for Jacco Nordman, who pulls into the pits. The McLaren, the first car to go into the pits. And now the drivers are going to see what exactly happens here and how they're going to go. So Jacco Nordman's into the pits. He does have the rest of the field come past him, likes of Swart, Trichardt, they clear past him. Jason Farmer continues on, but they will sit and look at what that pit stop looks like. They will see what Jacco Nordman's pit stop looks like. How much time is he spending in? Is he looking at changing tires? Is he looking at just filling up a tank and going to the end? This is all the factors that start to come in play, and we'll keep an eye on those times as well to give you a bit of an understanding of how close it is going to be for the pit stops. Already now he's up to 37 seconds. That tells me he has filled up the car. He is putting a new set of boots on the on the car as well. 38 seconds he's been stopped in the box. Over 1 minute so far. Down entrance of pit lane, stopped and release. It has been 1 minute, and we're still counting. And that gives you a bit of an understanding of what our drivers are looking at here. Jaco Nordman still waiting to come off that pit limiter as he waits to come out. Now can release. It has been a 1 minute 22 from entrance to exit with a 38-second stop in the box, and does see the field come through. So he's at the back of the pack and is the first of the drivers to the side. It's pit stop time. It's trying to get ourselves sorted out here. Louis Trichot trying to fight out against Gert Swart. Now suddenly we'll see likes of Jason Farmer sitting in his mirrors, looking at him. All the drivers considering they're going to go a little bit longer into this race, really trying to stretch those tanks a little bit further, stretch the tires as Trichot holds the racing line. He is not going to give up the position as he's onto the back of Swart. Now it's up to the faster car of Jason Farmer to clear on past without rounding up in a problem. He does go to the inside, forcing Trichot onto the outside line. Guns it down into the corner, late on the anchors. Gert Swart opens up the corner a little bit longer, and that has allowed Jason Farmer to come through. And immediately, Trichot tries to take a look, and Gert was absolutely nearly caught out there. He opened up the corner to be nice, and that ultimately nearly cost him that 13th position. He tried to go and help out first place, and Louis Trichot saw that opportunity ahead of him. He said, right, I've got this, I'm going to go for it, and he sunk it in. He went and warned Swart, you be nice, you show that 1 ounce of respect, and I'm going to go and give you a hard charge. You put out a hand, I'm taking that on. I am going to hunt you for that lunch money, and I am going to keep that solid fight in. As Louis Trichot, once again, keeps the pressure on Gert Swart, trying to see where he can get that little bit of momentum underneath him. A little bit further up the road, we got Lubert Mankies fighting out against Ulrich Diaga. These two constantly swiping at one another, trying to see and test where that opportunity is going to go in. And we hear the pit is now open. The pit window is now open for drivers. And I do want to bring up, that is a crucial factor, because we were talking about Jaco Nordman, who pulled into the pits, did a fuel stop, tire stop, and everything. The pit window was not open. So he will still have to go back into the pits to serve that pit stop, and that is going to cost him a bit of time. Louis Trichot immediately into the pits. Heineke and Skitter dive into the pits. They are trying to outdo one another, and this is where it comes in. So my mistake, folks. I thought it was going to be a pit stop allowed at any time, but obviously I didn't read the rules, and the rest of the drivers did. Chris Heineke and Sean Herrera pull into the pits. They getting their pit stops done and dusted. Louis Trichot, Peter de Villiers all diving into the pits. Jason Farmer is going to go a little bit longer by the looks of it. He is trying to push a bit harder into this race, and will be trying to eye out, is it a pit stop now in 45 minutes, or is he going to go that little bit more, as the pit window is open, but for a very narrow window for our drivers, 50 seconds. So you got to get this pit stop done and dusted. 48, wow, this pit stop window is not going to be pleasant for a lot of our drivers out there, as Jason Farmer and Anthony Moritz are looking to carry on that drive. They're going to have to seriously consider their pit stops a little bit more into this. 30 seconds to go. I don't think they're going to make it. Franz Spinardi into the pits, as we do see Louis Trichot getting a penalty stop-go for speeding in pit lane. He's going to have to serve that. Gert Swart's going to go past the pit lane. Oh my. Oh me, oh my, oh seriously, oh my. Chris Heineke, stop-go 30 second as he got off the button a little bit too early. Trying to chase down the back of Sean Herrera ahead of him. And our pit window is now closed. Our pit window is now closed. Jason Farmer is into the pits. Question is, did he get in early enough? Anthony did not get into the pits. Neither did Gert Swart. And that is a rough one. Gert Swart and Jaco Nordman. Jaco pitted out of the pit window, and ultimately will still need to get the pit stop done, but the pit window is now closed. That means that mandatory pit stop has just been ripped apart, and here comes Anthony into the pits. 43 minutes into this race, and I don't think they'll be able to serve that pit stop. Farmer has just made it by the skin of his teeth. Now needs to just wait out his time here. Anthony, who's in second place, pitted a little bit later. And let's see if that is going to clear his pit stop. I wonder if it is. If it doesn't, it's going to hurt. Chris Heineke, stop go 32nd. And the likes of Louis Trekard has got to stop go 32nd. Those two have to serve those 30-second stops by pulling into the box, waiting, because they got a slap on the wrist for going and pitting and coming off the limiter a little too early. They hooked that second gear, turned off the pit limiter, and that cost him a bit of time. As Kurtzwart dives into the pit lane, Chris Heineke dives into the pit lane, Louis Trekard dives into the pit lane. Now Farmer out on track, Skitter up into the second. He's got a bit of room to the likes of Ruan Heineke. Sean Lerero retakes that fourth position. Ulrich Diaga and Lebert Menkes going and moving up into sixth position. Moritz still in pit lane. Heineke, Swart, all still in the pits as well. And looking at the pit stops though, well, it was everyone taking a set of tires and everyone trying to go and see what they can do here. But ultimately, it's going to come through. And here's the telling sign. Anthony pulled into the pits, but due to him being out of the pit window, it didn't count. It was a very, very short time that they had to dive into the pits. And unfortunately, he was on the other end of the circuit that cost him that little bit of time. Jason Farmer was able to get it in lastminute.com, but Anthony is going to get a penalty for this one. Geert's going to get a penalty for this one. So is Jaco Nordman. And Jaco was the first to do the pit stops, but it was out of the pit window that now has just gone and thrown in. Now, I do think it's possibly 180 seconds if you don't pit. Now, I'm just going to double check myself on that one. Pit penalty. So, off to the rule books we go. And let's see if you fail to do a mandatory pit stop in a set of corsa competizione, the in-game penalty system will result in immediate disqualification for events acquired. So, wow. Depending on the specific race rules of the server game mode, you may be required to change tires, refuel, mandatory driver swap. But this is a really rough one. And if it is, it's a DQ. And that is a tough one. It can be deemed as a disqualification for drivers, as a violation, and not even a time penalty. I mean, that is just a tough one for the likes of Moritz, Nordman, and Swart. By the end of the race, they might actually just be DQ'd, and that will just absolutely bin their run, as they were out on circuit, pushing as hard as they can. Oh man, that is just gut-wrenching for the three drivers. I mean, Jaco Nordman was first into the pit, but Duty wasn't in the pit window. Anthony got into the pits as one lap after the pit window. So was Gerrit Swart. They pitted a little bit later into the race. The rest of the field are okay, but these three drivers on the line, by the end of the race, in 39 minutes time, they might see the end of the race being a DQ, as we do see Ruan Heineke had to really step around Jaco Nordman, losing that little bit of time. And we do have Peter de Villiers, unfortunately, losing a bit of time. He got and slipped that car around, and now trying to pick up pace. Let's go back a little bit and see what happened. He's been battling with the Ferrari. Oh, it just runs out wide. It just had that slow, dreadful slide. I tend to call it the ACC death slide, as it just sits on the traction control and you just really wait for the car to stop before you can get yourself going once again. And always a tough time out there. But Jason Farmer, looking to take a victory here, has managed to open up a 3-second gap to Sean Skitter, who's on a hard charge to try and bring it back. Ruan Heineke holds on to third ahead of Lerero. That is going to push Heineke above Lerero in the championship, only just. That is going to be a tough time. Ulrich Diaga, likes of Lebert Menkes in 6th. 7th is likes of Tyron Myberg, with Anthony Moritz holding on to 8th provisionally right now. We'll try and see at the end of the race Timothy Gomez holds on to 9th, with Hannes Kruger holds on to that top 10. Chris Heineke in 11th. Francis Bernardi holds on to that 12th position. Jaco Nordman along with Gert Swart, and along with Peter de Villiers in 15. Louis Trickart in 16th, and 17th goes to Wimpy Mankies, who's still circulating at the moment. I mean, this is turning into a solid race for some. Others, a little less of an enjoyable one. Looking back at it, and I'm sure they will be getting the radio comms about what's going to happen in this race. I mean, the pit window naturally in the sim, it's a sim penalty, not even a steward penalty. This is a sim penalty that will be given to the drivers, and I'm just reading out to it, and it's gut-wrenching to it. I mean, by missing out that pit window that was so small out there, if you fail to complete the mandatory pit stop in a set of course competizione, the game penalty system will result in an immediate disqualification, but it's not immediate. So I do think it's going to be possibly a time penalty. I don't know. Some are saying it's a DQ. Some are saying that's a time. I'm leaning on the DQ part here, looking at Reddit, because this is a major throw into the championship. And just like you guys out there in the virtual grandstands taking a look at this, the undercuts, the overcuts definitely is what the strategies are out in the race. But the pit window time does allow for drivers to get those pit stops done and either get an undercut or an overcut within a very specific time window. Franz Bernardi and Jaco Nordman continuing on the charge, both of them keeping a bit of pressure. It's McLaren and the Aston Martin, with Nordman at the moment in a provisional 13th position. Now, I say provisional because we are finding this story as it unravels in front of us in 35 minutes and 57 seconds time. We're all about to learn something rather new here for a set of course of competizione. For those that already know about it, we would love for you to lean in and let us know what's happening out here. Bernardi unable to try and hold that position, loses out to the McLaren that runs out a bit wide. Jaco Nordman trying to climb back through the order. He had a spin a little bit earlier in the race and now is starting to make up some time. He's up into 12th. This is a driver that pitted early, dropped down to 17th position, and now just trying to cycle his way through. He is just trying to keep a solid drive. He has got the Aston Martin applying a bit of pressure onto him, and an big mistake coming in as Francis Bernardi had to brake a little bit early, try and see Nordman through on the curbing there, not wanting to get him caught out, and ultimately having a bit of a tough time out there for our drivers. I do want to highlight some factors though, because even though they're not in a fight, it's always good to know. Peter de Villiers has just done his personal best time in this race of a 1:36.927. So even knowing that he had the impact on the nose, he got his pit stop done and dusted. He got the car repaired. He spent a lot of time in the box getting that car repaired. Did set his personal best in this race and continues to keep on a solid charge. 35 seconds behind Gert Swart, but is still racing the clock there. He is giving himself something to fight for. Jason Farmer, though, has set the fastest lap in the second stint of this race, down to 1:34.3. Not quite that 1:33.8 he set earlier on in this race, and not compared to his qualifying time of a 1:33, but 2.9 seconds behind him, depending on what's going to happen, because now Jason Farmer's got to get past his own teammate of Chris Heineke out in the Aston Martin. Heineke holds on to the 11th position. This is Chris Heineke, not Ruben Heineke, who holds on to 3rd. But Chris Heineke, will see him in the mirror, and I do think there'll be a bit of a discussion as it goes on. But it is Sean Skitter running into an issue. Skitter loses the car. Just snaps the rear out, slides it, keeps it out of the wall, but beaches it through. And this is a problem, because not only do we see Hannes Kruger in the white Ferrari, we saw this Ferrari come through. Ruben Heineke now up into 2nd place, and Ruben Heineke looking to maximize the points. This is what he needed to try and move up in the championship and possibly just possibly have enough to take first place and put a bit of a buffer in between himself, Sean Lerera, Sean Skitter, and Jason Farmer. Ruan Heineke at the moment will be scoring a good haul of points for the championship. He'll be scoring 67 points to Jason Farmer's 70 points that he'll be scoring this evening. But this will boot Ruan Heineke up into first in the championship and ultimately lead him in for a far charge up the field. A great run for our drivers, and ultimately is going to be an absolutely brutal one for a couple of them to think about. Hannes Kruger keeping on the back of Sean Skitter, who's going to be kicking himself from that mistake and thinking, right, what do I need to do here to try and stay in for the fight? Ultimately, these drivers are giving it one big push, trying to think, right, what is the game plan here? How can I make up a bit of time? What I need to do to stay in for a solid charge, and where do I need to try and move forward? Ruan and Chris Heineke looks in the mirrors. He does see Jason Farmer starting to close up in his mirrors into turn one. Jason Farmer trying to keep up that drive, but not having the grounds caught up to Chris Heineke as yet, as Heineke is trying to keep the pressure to catch up to Hannes Kruger, who holds on to that 10th place just ahead of him. The Ferrari just ahead, constantly keeping that solid drive, trying to see where it comes in. Peter de Villiers gets a little bit closer to Anthony Moritz in the Mustang, but is lapped down on him and trying to find where he can close up that little bit of time. Heineke late on the brakes, trying to get it all done and dusted. Gets onto the loud pedal as fast as he can as Farmer switches around to the left-hand side, clears on by, says thank you very much. And now it's going to be Chris Heineke to get towed along. Ruan Heineke trying to figure out where he can get that little bit of drive and where he can start trying to close up to his teammate Jason Farmer. Now 8 seconds up the road. 5 seconds behind Ruan Heineke is Sean Skitter. Lerera holds on to fourth. He has been holding on to that position, but just hasn't found that little bit of drive to get his way up through the order. I mean, these drivers are giving it everything they can. They're starting to feel the wear and tear of this race, and ultimately it's turning into a little bit of a nightmare situation for some as they look towards the future. They're trying to see, okay, how can I gain time? What is going to be the factors here, and how can they move forward through this race? It's all about that give or take that they're going to have to push for, and ultimately that turns into a harder race than you think. That is a lot of mental gymnastics you start to think around, as well as you need to try and figure out what's that solid drive. As we do see Franz Bonatti trying to catch up. He had Lerero just ahead of him, and Sean Lerero just opens up that gap once again. Anthony Moritz trying to make up a bit of time as he holds on to that 8th position. He does see Tyrone Meinberg in the second, one of the 3 Ford Mustangs out on the circuit. Anthony, however, has not served that pit stop in the sim, as has been recognized. We saw him go into the pits, but it wasn't in the pit window, and ultimately that's cost him this race, and will be, unfortunately, by the end of it, scoring a DSQ and having that on his cards for the very first time this season. He's going to be getting that DSQ. He hasn't even had a drop round. So Anthony, who's been in every race, hasn't had any skips. The open drivers that had skips is Jeffrey LaRue, Jason Luck, along with Gideon Bernardi, Wilfred Robertson, Peter de Villiers, and Wimpy Mankies have all had skips. Jakob Nordman's had skips. Gerald Pretorius, unfortunately, has left, but he's also skipped around, and it looks like he's going to be losing out this one as well. So the drivers are not having an easy time in the championship, and I'm trying to think about the big plan here as we keep an eye on Chris Heineke trying to catch up to Hannes Kruger, who currently holds on to the last spot on the top 10. The Ferrari for the Quaco Racing trying to really open up the distance here, trying to see what he can do. Later on the brakes, trying to see what is the game plan here. Sees Chris Heineke in the mirrors, trying to close up that Aston Martin. Lights on as a warning just saying, I'm coming for you. I'm making that little bit of a distance. I am making up that time, and it's going to be a big one. As you can see how much Chris Heineke is making up under braking. He is just hard on the anchors a little bit later and trailing off a little bit earlier to see if he can close up the distance. Here we go once again, eating into that gap, taking up 0.2 of a second every single corner, and now seeing an opportunity here to try and go for the pass for Hannes Kruger. If you want to hold on to the top 10 and provisional top 10, depending on whether Moritz is going to be a DSQ or it's going to be a massive time penalty. If it is a time penalty, well, Hannes Kruger is in for a provisional 9th position. Chris Heineke a provisional 10th at the moment. That's going to be that solid drive down to the wire. Late on the brakes. Once again, Heineke sends it into the corner. Seeing the back end of that Ferrari, but comes out a bit wide. Just trying to really throw it in through the corners. Looked in for turn 1. Can he sink it through? Decides better of it. Allows Hannes Kruger to go on through. He knows he can make up time through this next section where he's a little bit more confident. Hannes Kruger's a little bit more cautious in through this last little bit. On the brakes, in for the inside, and it's going to be the Aston Martin clearing through the double right-hander. Hannes Kruger, no answer for it, was offline and just loses that little bit of drive yet again. Anthony Moritz pushing on to the back of Tyrone Myberg. Tyrone looks in his mirror, sees Anthony there, and now with 26.5 minutes to go in this race, drivers need to start firing up. They need to start really getting on the button here. If you want to go for those positions, you really need to try and find those lap times. And looking at the last lap time, Anthony sits with a 135.8 on that last lap compared to Tyrone with a 136.0. Is it going to be any better this time around as Anthony has closed up at a rate of knots? Tyrone going and dealing with that Ford starting to snap underneath him and come across the line. It's a 135.4, the best lap time for Anthony Moritz this race. Anthony is now really leaning into it. He's trying to put that bit of pressure on, seeing for an opportunity, sees that he has a chance here, and ultimately needs to really fire up. He needs to get that pass done. If it's going to be a time penalty, he needs to make up positions. He needs to open up distance and try and get it done and dusted. He's 0.3 onto the back of Myberg, and now trying to look to get past, looks around the outside as we're on the front splitter, swings it around the outside line, just can't get on the power early enough. Tyrone once again cutting him off, slamming the door, following by the security barrier, everything to keep Anthony at bay. Anthony now into the slipstream. Tyrone Myberg not giving up the fight here. For the Go Slow team, it's time to go fast. It's time to really go and send it. Try and hold the line. Try and fight back as Anthony constantly doing everything he can in the Oxford machine. The Oxford Distributors once again keeping a solid bit of momentum at the moment, trying to see what he can do, and our drivers really on a hard push, trying to see what is going to be that main run, as our drivers will be thinking, what's the big plan here? How can I move forward? What is going to be that hard push up through the order? And ultimately, who is going to stay at that sharp end in the field? This is always the hardest part of the race. This is that tough, gut-wrenching blow for some if you just can't keep up that momentum, and ultimately turning into just a manic drive for competitors that are really trying to get it going. And Myberg just trying to deal with that rear end, starting to snap out underneath him, pushing harder and harder, trying his absolute best to get it done and dusted, but ultimately is starting to lose some crucial time into this race. Late on the brakes, tries to go around the outside, just battles for that bit of momentum and loses out that little bit of drive. Moritz once again hunting down that inside line. He's a little bit more comfortable to try and send it under braking, but it's Myberg who is keeping his foot on the throttle, slides that rear out in the rear tires, starting to cry for mercy on the back of the Ford Mustang of Tyrone Myberg. as it sounds like two NASCARs brute forcing their way around the circuit, around the beautiful circuit of Misano. It is just a stellar drive, and now starting to match pace with one another. They now see the opportunity is here, but how is it going to work out? Our closest fight on the circuit are these two at the moment, with Jason Farmer, Ruben Heineke, Sean Skitter, Sean Lerera, Ulrich Diaga holding on to the top 5, have opened up quite a big gap between one another. Lebert Mankies, Tyron Myberg, they've got 23 seconds separating them, with Anthony Moritz 0.4 of a second, literally sniffing the back of Myberg's car, trying to see what type of fuel is he running and trying to read off the back of the gearbox, seeing what gear he's in and what the serial number is sitting on the back of the car as well. Down the inside, looking for the pass once again. Myberg was able to get that drive and gets a little bit of a take slapper on the exit. Has to go for the inside line once again for a solid defense, and it's going to be around the outside as Moritz once again late on the brakes, try to make it work, looked for the undercut, but lost out that drive, going a little too wide, and that just allows Tyron Myberg a little bit more breathing room to happen yet again. Tyrant runs out wide. That's cost him time here. Moritz trying to draw him back. Looks to try and close up that gap a little bit closer. Nose to tail. They go through it again. The Oxford Distributors car not to be caught out against the Go Slow Racing team of Tyron Myberg, who is for certain not going slow. He is absolutely keeping his foot on the gas. He wants that 7th position. He wants to hold it at all costs. And at the moment, with 21 minutes to go, this has gone from a endurance styled event to a sprint race for our drivers to really start to hunker down, put that little bit of pressure on the drivers. Two of them getting a solid bit of momentum at the moment. Just trying to get it through. Tyron Myberg fighting with the car as we saw him sliding in and out, looking in the rearview mirror. He has got that green and black Mustang all over the back of him, pushing harder and harder, looking for every opportunity to try and get it done. Once again, just not able to go and keep it going. I mean, this is just manic driving coming into play here. And ultimately, gets a slide, loses a little bit of drive. Moritz couldn't quite capitalize on it as well. We heard the traction control kick in, and that was turning into a little bit of a tough time between these two as Myberg runs out wide yet again. Moritz has got the inside line, and it's a drag race down the wire yet again. Vimpy is going to see these two catching up at a rate of knots, but it looks like it's going to be Moritz down the inside. Has he got it done in Dustin? Couldn't quite get it done. Tyron Myberg yet again saves a life and trying to push through. But talking about these 2.2, take a look at this. This is a big one for the championship. Sean Lerera now looking to try and get past Sean Skitter. Dives down the inside. Late on the anchors. The BMW just managing to get ahead of the Honda NSX. Skitter runs out wide. Trying to bring him back into the fight. The two of them going side by side, but ultimately it's Lerero that's able to push that nose forward and now takes up that 3rd place spot with Heineke in 2nd. This is just to try and keep a little bit of points in the championship. Try and hold that little bit of time to try and find it out that little bit more. So it's Griffin Sim Racing. 1, 2, 3 at the moment with Logistical Nightmare holding on to that 4th place. Griffin Sim Racing in 5th place with the likes of Quacko Racing at 7th, Go Slow, Quacko at 6th, Go Slow in 7th, with the Oxford ATT Racing going around the outside yet again. Trying to have a look here. Anthony and Tyron fighting out between one another, and also for the team battle that is going on. This is turning into a manic drive for our competitors. For a team aspect, from a driver aspect, from a absolute fantastic race. Well, Anthony's about to get a little bit of assistance from a certain Gert Swart, who will see these two in the mirrors and go, right, I have an opportunity here to try and make it work out in my favor, but also I can help out my teammate who is caught behind a car. I don't necessarily have to be the nicest guy on the circuit to allow the pass to happen. I have to hold my racing line, be predictable, and ensure that the pass is done. I can't find it, but I don't have to be the nicest guy. I can hold the racing line, and that will force Myberg to come offline. And if he just happens to come off the throttle and allows Anthony to come through, well, that's even 10 points going to him. Plays the team game here, and Tyron Myberg is no stranger to this fact. He knows that he's got a little bit of a problem here, and seeing that he's caught between the two green Mustangs can cost him a bit of time here. Moritz hoping for a solid drive onto the back of Myberg. Once again, trying to see if he can close up in the slipstream. Myberg to the inside, trying to guard that line. It's just manic as competitors, as we do see Gert actually going and doing a rather sensible thing as a driver. And I've got to give 10 points to our blue flag drivers. The track knowledge is really on point here tonight, where the drivers are not sacrificing their time, but at the same stage of it, they're also not sacrificing the time of the competitors coming around them. Instead, they're running out that little bit wide, they're allowing the pass to happen, they're not costing each other a bit of time out on circuit, rather playing the nice game here. And also, it could have been a team aspect game then. It could have been had to back Tyron up a little bit. Instead, chose not to. So, 10 points. Really 10 points on that one for getting that pass done and dusted. And just to also think about the bigger picture here as a driver, as Tyron Myberg still fights on. Anthony all over the back of him to push a bit harder. Skitter down to fourth, not having an easy time, as it's a problem for Louis Treckart. Louis Treckart off into the dirt. What on earth happened to him? In through the left-hander here. Brakes, turns off. No, Louis Treckart retired the car. That is so strange. And there's no revs. I don't hear that engine. No, there it is. The engine is on. Louis Treckart has just come to a stop on the outside of the corner, pulled off, and for some odd reason is out. He's not retiring the car, but is just parked in the sandpit. That's going to be a yellow flag for the drivers, and the more that go through and see him, the more they'll know, okay, he's off the circuit, he's away from everyone. They'll have spotters also telling him, hey, listen, don't worry about the yellow flag, it's miles off it. But you want to be sure that you don't have a car rejoining a circuit and landing in a bit of a problem with you in this race. And I do think Louis managed to get himself going. Yes, he has. So whatever got him fouled up, that he had the car parked off to the right-hand side, losing out to fellow Quacha driver Wimpy Mankies, he has now managed to get that car going, and we'll see it through to the end of the last 14 minutes of this race. Anthony looks down the inside of Myberg, the two of them door to door, and it looks like Anthony getting a stellar run and goes for the cutback. Out hit the anchors as he nearly went into the back of Tyron Myberg. Had to really go and slow the car down there. Tyron was able to swoop on back, get onto the anchors, slow the cars up, knock him off cam, and now Tyron Myberg running out wide yet again. Anthony leaning on the pressure, but if you want to talk about how these two are slowing each other up enough, well, Gert Swart, who is right behind them now, who has been overtaken, he is a lap down on these drivers and is thinking, right, you guys are ahead of me, but now I'm starting to get a little bit of a frustration here. You guys are ending up fouling each other up enough that I am making up ground. late on the brakes, trying to see it through, as it's going to be Moritz once again on Tyron Myberg. Absolutely keeping the pressure on one another, trying to see what exactly they can do to move forward. How hard do they need to push? What do they need to do to think outside the box really to move forward in this race? Is going to have to be that extra special push. Tyron Myberg sliding the car around. Those rear tires absolutely crying out for mercy at this stage of the game, but just not getting that solid run. Anthony once again back on the attack. This is our closest fight on circuit. Everyone else has got so much room between one another. You can start utilizing the calendar. Heck, I mean, Jason Farmer is right behind Hurt, and you see these two fighting out as well. Hurt looks to the inside, cuts a corner a little bit deep again, trying to get underneath Tyron Myberg, and just couldn't get that drive. Once again, Myberg center of circuit to right-hand side. Doesn't utilize all the curb, but he knows he can just try for that solid defense. Focusing on corner exit. That is his main goal. Get the corner exits right. You carry on with a solid drive in and out, in and out. That is ultimately what he needs to do to try and make it work in his favor, to try and get that drive a little bit more. Anthony leads on once again, trying to get that pass. Looks towards the inside through the right hander. Not close enough to capitalize yet. Going to try and go a little bit late on the brakes. You can see hard on the brakes, coming off hard on the brakes yet again, trying to steady the Mustang into the corner, while Myberg was a lot more progressive on the brakes. He was more than happy to keep that drive and has a solid run. So Ruan Heineke will be jumping Loureiro in the points only just at the moment. Farmer will be climbing up through the order. Skitter from third place is looking at dropping out of the top three with 2 rounds left after this one, and it's going to be a tough one. It's a 6-round championship. We're on round 4 for the SimRace South Africa GT3, the simGT3 second season of 2026. Proudly sponsored by Oxford Distributors and also backed by YOLO Design Co. It has been one of our top runs, and also one of the South Africa's oldest sim racing communities out here. We've done racing on Assetto Corsa, on Le Mans Ultimate, and so much more. And now trying to really go up through the order, just trying to have a bit of fun out here. And ultimately, it's turning into a bit of a wild race for many of these drivers as we're getting into the closing stages of the championship. Everyone having to think, all right, what's the game plan here? What's my ideas? What is going to be ultimately that phenomenal charge that can really be the make or break for my race? And who will be able to hand at the top, as it looks like Anthony got a solid run on Tyron. Tyron once again closing off a line, goes in the middle of the circuit, cuts the corner, holds him back, as we do see Louis Tricot into the dirt yet again. Louis Tricot having a tough time out there from his race, and it seems to be just not falling in his favor. He is just counting down the time. It is down to the seconds for him to count down, looking and saying, when can I just cross the line now? I unfortunately had a race where it just seems like something went wrong with the car that forced him to pull off a racing line into the sand pit, get himself stopped, wait for a while, and then get himself back on track. Whatever's gone on wrong with that car, it has not turned out to be the easiest of races, that's for certain. A tough going for our competitors as it's down the inside, as Anthony has finally got the ride on Tyron. Tyron cuts the corner, keeps the pressure on the two. The two are drag racing. Jason Farmer's going to try and go around the outside, as it's going to be Anthony to guard the inside line. He's trying to stop Tyron from going the inside. Tyron late on the brakes, 3 wide through the corner. Jason Farmer goes out wide. He straightens up the steering wheel. Tyron sent it down the inside of Anthony Moritz, and that cost him a bit of time. It was a throw of note to try and get that done, but it wasn't going to work out. And there's that side-by-side as they came through the corner on the exit, and you could see how little drive he had after getting a little bit unsteady into the braking zone. A bit of a replay of what happened, but now Jason Farmer gets past these two. He puts a lap on them, And Jason Farmer has officially overtaken 7th position and now needs to close up a 29-second gap to get to 6th position up ahead. Jason Farmer is in a race of his own right now, 12 seconds ahead of Ruben Heineke, who we will see catching up. Sean Lamero in 3rd, Skitter in 4th, Ulrich Diaga holding on to that top 5 as it's a manic push down to the wire. Tyron Myberg, after pushing that car harder and harder, has he killed off a life in those tires, and Anthony now needs to try and open up that gap a little bit more. So a solid run for Jason Farmer, who leads out the race. Heineke in 2nd, trying to overtake his brother out there, and Chris Heineke runs out wide in that acid mine, but Ruben Heineke can't quite get that pass done and dusted. These two just having a ton of fun out there, and Ruben Heineke trying to keep a solid drive. Does see Chris mine over to the left-hand side. It's going to be Ruben late on the brakes, try and get a pass done. Does get it sorted out, and will be carrying on with his race. He holds on 2nd, and a Sean Lamero, who holds on for 3rd. Sean Skitter in 4th position. Ulrich Diaga into 5th. And the bit Mankeys holds on 6th place. Anthony Moritz trying to close up that gap with Tyron Myberg in 8th position. Timothy Gomez a little bit further down in 9th. Chris Heineke trying to push into that top 10 with Hannes Kruger in 11th position. Jaco Nordman in 12th. Francis Bonani in 4th. Gert Swart, Peter de Villiers, Vimpy Mankeys a little bit further up the road, and Louis Trickard currently rounding out the pack with 6 minutes and 50 seconds to go. We have now crossed over to one of the hottest parts of the circuit. The drivers are now starting to feel it, and with the tires all worn out, I think a couple of drivers are starting to feel that they can't really push that hard anymore. They can't feel the grip as they once did, and ultimately that's going to be the tough time. And it looks like Sean Skitter is one of those drivers starting to feel it early on with a stellar drive to try and keep on to that 2nd place. Now is only a 2nd ahead of Ulrich Diaga. His times have been dropping off. His last lap time was at 37.9 compared to what he was running in them, averaging 35s around the circuit. Ulrich Diaga's last lap time was at 35.7, and it now has managed to reel in that gap a little bit more for Sean Skitter, who dives into pit lane. Skitter into pit lane. Was he fuel saving? And I think it was, because Ulrich Diaga now shoots up into 4th. Skitter into the pits with no penalties. I think he was trying to fuel save on that last lap, and it's cost him now as he nails it into the pits, gets himself stopped in the box, and that is it. He's lost out. Mankeys now clears path for Skitter. This is a nightmare that's come into play. A strategy miscall has cost him, as it was a fuel stop. He did not have enough and ultimately had to lift and coast. He's lost out to Ulrich Diaga. He's lost out to the Mankeys, and now trying to get off the button as quick as possible. Here comes Anthony Moritz, who will just file in right behind Sean Skitter. I don't think he's going to have enough momentum to get past him towards the end of the race, but Sean Skitter going and making a very rare mistake in his pit stop by underfueling the car, not expecting how hard he was pushing in the early stages of the race. That went and fouled him up of fuel, and also has now fouled him up of the championship. He will lose out of that top 3 in the championship, and that is going to cost him time. Tyron Myberg fighting with that Ford. He is sliding it around, and that ultimately is just losing more and more time to Anthony Moritz. He's pushing as hard as he can, but he's just not finding that grip underneath him. Ruben Heineke looking to get past Timothy Gomez at the moment, who is right in front of him, and Ruben Heineke looking to put a lap on Timothy. It's our leaders on lap 53, and we are taking a look at Timothy, who sits down in 9th position. He's on lap 52. He's 1 lap down on our leaders, who are on a stellar push. And I mean, Jason Farmer at the moment, who's catching up, he sees Sean Skitter. If this tells you how much the race has just swayed out of Skitter's favor, well, first place is about to put a lap on him. It's going to be Jason Farmer lapping 6th place. with 3 minutes and 45 seconds to go. And I think Jason Farmer is looking to do this because he lies 4th in the championship. Skitz is in 3rd. And in the early stages of the championship, Jason Farmer had the exact same problem coming to him. Farmer is having a rough time trying to clear past all the traffic, but now has got a second win underneath him to try and see if he can put not only enough space between himself and Ruben Heineke, but what it's going to be for salt in the wounds for Sean Skitter if he sees Jason Farmer clear past him, putting a lap on him, and also now just trying to cycle his way through. I mean, that is a tough time out there as Chris Heineke clears past Gomez. And let's go back 30 seconds. Let's take a look at what happened here and how it all came to be. So it was Ruben Heineke that got the pass and forcing Timothy down onto the inside, really buttoning up that turn 1 for him. And now it's going to be Chris Heineke. Got the drive out in the Aston Martin, caught into the toe, looked to the inside, couldn't quite get the pass done. Timothy was fed to dummy though, outbraked himself, and that was Chris Heineke up on the inside of Timothy. Got that pass done, and now starting to try and stretch his legs. 0.5 of a second separate 9th and 10th place with 2 minutes and 20 seconds to go. Ruben Heineke went and fouled up Timothy a little bit more in this race, and Timothy now back down into that 10th position that he's been fighting so hard to get out of. He's been fighting so hard to climb up through the order, and now with a couple of laps left, he has got to push that a little bit harder as Chris Heineke is starting to open up 0.7 of a second. The Aston Martin a little bit more conservative on tyres compared to the 991 Porsche of Timothy Gomez. I mean, this is a tough run for them. And ultimately, it's going to come down to the wire. Jason Farmer trying to close up to Sean Skitter yet again, trying to see if he can add a little bit of salt to the wounds here. But I do think he will be starting his final lap next time by. With a minute and 26 to go, he's doing a minute and 34. Yep, next lap is going to be the final lap for him. And for the rest of the field, as Skitter's trying to get just that extra lap in to this race. Gomez once again trying to push as hard as he can, late on the anchors, trying to see if he can push on to Chris Heineke as he listens to that straight 6 go and absolutely scream through. The Porsche having a tough time there. You can hear that little bit of a gearbox and diff whine coming into play as he's trying to close up to the V8 ahead of him. The Aston Martin trying to open up the gap. Chris Heineke holding on to that 9th place, knows that next time by is 1 lap to go, and he has got to give it that final push as we do see Jakob Nordman back into the pits. Jakob Nordman back into the pits, and I think this is a fuel stop. It's going to be a short fuel stop for him as Jakob Nordman into the pits. It's not going to clear that mandatory pit stop, unfortunately, and that is going to be an impact to his race, but he does lose out to Franz Spinardi, might lose out to Kurt Swart as well, as Jason Farmer now doing a lap for Flowers. He is on his final lap and is on a level to himself right now. 136.3 on his last lap, is just coasting his way through this. Ruben Heineke holds on second. Sean Loureiro will be coming across in 3rd place. He does see Peter de Villiers, who will get a position back over, or get a lap back over Jakob Nordman. Apologies, Jakob Nordman just coming out of pit lane, so Peter de Villiers will be on the final push to try and get to Jakob Nordman. The McLaren driver trying to give it one last push. He's dropped down to 14th. I mean, this is a driver that was our very first pit stop in the race, pitted before the pit window, and unfortunately that has cost him a fair chunk of time. Also needs to pit again for fuel. Farmer, couple of corners to go, a little bit unstable under braking. Now just trying his luck. Sean Skitter relaxing off the throttle, seeing that the leader is coming on by, and with 1 corner to go, it is a stellar run from start to finish, a dominating run by 10 seconds. Jason Farmer of the Griffin Sim Racing team takes the victory ahead of Rern Heineke, his teammate, in second place. Rern Heineke will be jumping up through the order, and we do get confirmation for those that haven't pitted. It's not a DSQ, but it's a 130-second penalty added to their time. Rern Heineke gets second place. Sean Loureiro will drop off the top of the podium. Hand over to Rern Heineke with 2 routes to go. Sean Loureiro capturing that final stop on the podium, but his championship is in for a fight between Rern Heineke, Jason Farmer, and himself, battling out for honours for Season 2. Ulrich Diaga will take 4th place, with Lubert Mainkies taking 5th. Anthony Moritz for a provisional 6th place. We'll find out after the 130-second stat at his time. Tyron Myberg, after fighting out, is in 7th with Chris Heineke, Timothy Gomez, Hannes Kruger, Francis Bernardi, Gert Swart, Jakob Nordman, Peter de Villiers, Wimpy Mankies, and Louis Treckard will round out the pack here at the beautiful circuit of Misano. And what a drive! What an incredible, incredible drive from our competitors as they come across the line. It has been a manic, and you can see a bit of celebrations going on for our drivers. The Bear Mankeys pulls into the pits as Jason Farmer continues on to enjoy the celebration, dominating run. And there is our confirmation of results. Anthony Moritz drops down to 12th position, going and promoting up Hannes Kruger, Francis Bernardi, Timothy Gomez, Chris Heineke, Tyron Myberg. What a run from them. We're going to be going to a short break, and we'll be back with some of our highlights. And we are back, folks, right here in the commentary box. And what a race it has been. It has been a manic drive. And well, I mean, this has been a solid run. This has turned into a race of note. And drivers will be thinking, what can they do? I mean, this has been a battle. And ultimately, Jason Farmer gone and taken a solid run. Drivers had to really think about what they're doing, and will be thinking of what they can do. I mean, it's always a tough one of how they can battle, who is going to be standing at the top, and who will be going and fighting out for that solid charge. It is going to be Jason Farmer who is moving up through the order, and we'll be seeing how he's going to do, but also a solid run for the Griffin Sim Racing team. Rern Heineke going and finishing up in second place after a stellar drive. Ultimately, it did not fall in the favor of Sean Skitter by the end of the evening as he fell down the order. I mean, this has always been a difficult run, but now it's a great result. Bummer about the penalty for a couple of drivers, and a couple of drivers will be going and licking the wounds on that one. Anthony going and saying it's a bit of a bummer, but ultimately a great race indeed. He had a stellar time out there against Tyron Myberg. The two of them hammer and tongs for a long while till eventually Tyron's tyres gave up the ghost and landed up losing all that traction underneath him. The drivers having to think what was the better plan. I mean, this has always been a great run. And I've got to say, now it's down to the wire of ultimately who can stay at the sharp end of the field. This has got to be a wild one, folks. And we have got 2 rounds left. Can you believe it? We are now down into the dying races of this season. And ultimately, the championship is still up for grabs for many of these drivers to really think about what they're going to do as we start to look at our next rounds. It's going to be Spa on the 6th of July, and you can catch it right here on the Sim Racing South Africa channel. All you need to do is hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification icon, leave a like as well, as it does help with the algorithm, and also a comment of who do you think is getting driver of the day. Ultimately, I've got to say it's a solid fight between Myberg and the likes of Anthony Moritz for their nose-to-tail combat that they had for a long, long time in the sliding around. That, by far, I think, was one to be for driver of the day. But I'll leave it up to you down in the comments. And we will be ending off our championship on the 27th of July at 8 p.m. at Bathurst. I mean, this is a great run. Our drivers thinking about their races and what they can do for a solid drive. Folks, if you want to join up with all the racing, head down to sim.gp and join up with Sim Racing South Africa. Massive thank you to our sponsor, Oxford Distributors, for a stellar season and putting up a phenomenal run on it, and also to our partner, YOLO Designs Co. for being a part of the show. But absolutely amazing one. A big thank you to all our drivers, to all the teams, to all the stewards and admins behind the scenes here at SimRace South Africa. And a special thank you goes out to you out in the virtual grandstands, keeping us fired up on all cylinders, keeping us moving forward. And folks, we look forward to seeing you next time. We look forward to seeing you out at Belgium, and we look forward to seeing you at Spa-Francorchamps for round 5 of the championship. And like always, a good morning, a good afternoon, good evening, and good night, everybody!